He was the boy everyone envied and despised in equal measure. The son of a billionaire wrapped in designer fabric, sliding into school parking lots in cars other kids only saw on magazine covers. His life looked untouchable, stitched together, with gold and privilege. Yet behind the tinted glass of his Audi, behind the smirk he wore like armor, Lucas Reed was unraveling. It wasn't loud, not the kind of collapse you could point to and say, "There it is." His destruction was quieter than that. It was in the grades he never bothered to look at, in the assignments he left blank, in the silence that followed him even when he was surrounded by people. He was crumbling where no one thought to look, inside. And the cruelest truth of all was that no one cared. Not his classmates who whispered his name like gossip and envy. Not his teachers, who passed him along as though he were a burden they couldn't afford to fail. Not even his father, who measured worth in achievements and balance sheets, not in broken sons. Lucas Reed was alone even in a world built to carry him. And yet in the most unexpected corner of his life, someone unseen was waiting, not to scold him, not to flatter him, but to tear through his illusions until nothing false remained. Lucas grew up in a house where ceilings soared higher than some people's dreams. Chandeliers glittered over marble floors and the kitchen staff moved like clockwork around his whims. His birthdays were catered events with ice sculptures, famous musicians, and gift bags more expensive than some families. Mortgages. He had every material thing a person could imagine. But when he blew out his candles year after year, his wishes remained the same. Though he never said them out loud, he wished to matter, to someone, to anyone, for more than his last name. At 17, Lucas was the kind of student schools bragged about having but teachers dreaded teaching. His entrance to the most elite academy in Atlanta wasn't earned. It was wired. His father, Charles Reed, could buy reputations the way others bought groceries. For the faculty, Lucas's arrogance was a tax they paid to keep the donations flowing. He mocked lectures with smirks, tossed textbooks aside, and swaggered through marble hallways lined with oil-painted portraits of men who had changed the world. Lucas believed he didn't need to learn from them. He was destined to surpass them by inheritance alone. His classmates didn't admire him. They tolerated him. Some envied his tailored jackets and wristwatches that cost more than their families' annual income. Others sneered at his hollow bravado, but no one challenged him. His infamous quote, "I could buy this school if I wanted to. What grade is going to change that?" became legend, repeated in whispers across lunch tables and locker rooms. He laughed when he heard it resurface. To him, the entire system was a game he'd already won by being born. Home offered no refuge. Charles Reed was a man carved from steel, every word measured, every gaze a judgment. One night, after yet another phone call from the school about Lucas's failures, Charles cornered him in the study. The shelves towered with books Charles had actually read, spines cracked from use. He stood in front of them like a general at war. "You're an embarrassment," Charles said, his voice low but slicing. "If you worked for me, you'd be fired." Lucas crossed his arms, leaning into his practiced smirk. "But I'm not. Your employee. I'm your son." "The world doesn't care about that," Charles snapped. "Either you become someone or you'll be nothing but another rich kid with a hollow name, and I won't carry you." The silence afterward was a blade. Lucas tried to mask the sting with a scoff, but deep down it cut. His father wasn't bluffing. The next morning, Lucas returned to school the same way he always did, pulling into the faculty parking lot in his sleek Audi, sunglasses shading eyes that hadn't slept well. He strolled through the halls as if nothing could touch him, as if his father's words hadn't echoed in his chest all night. Students looked at him, some with admiration, some with disdain, but he didn't look back. He didn't have to, yet someone did look. She always did. Near the side entrance of the school, an older black woman in a faded uniform was mopping the floor with steady, deliberate movements. Her name tag read E. Wallace, though no one ever read it. Her hair was tied back in a simple scarf. Her eyes focused yet distant, like she was holding entire worlds inside her that no one ever asked to see. Students passed her daily without acknowledgement. Teachers walked by as though she were part of the wallpaper. To them, she was invisible. To Lucas, she didn't exist at all. Just background noise in his gilded story. But invisible people have a way of carrying truths the world refuses to see. That morning, Lucas barely noticed her, but she noticed him. Not the Audi keys dangling from his fingers or the arrogance in his stride, but the hollowness behind it. The weight he was pretending not to carry. She pressed the mop into the tiles, hummed softly under her breath, and said nothing. Not yet. It wouldn't be long before the cracks in Lucas's glass castle widened. His father would cut off the credit cards, take back the car, and force him to ride the school bus like the very students he mocked. His grades would plummet further, his arrogance begin to collapse under the pressure of his failures. And in those moments of humiliation, when the crowd would laugh and the teachers would shake their heads, he would hear a voice he'd never heard before. A voice that would not flatter him, nor condemn him, but challenge him in a way no one else ever dared. That voice belonged to the janitor, and it would change everything. The morning was bitter, colder than most in Atlanta, and Lucas sat in the back of the school bus with his hood pulled over his head. The Audi was gone. His credit cards, gone. Even the expensive watch he used to flash under the fluorescent lights had been tucked away in a drawer at home. His father had stripped him of the props that made him untouchable. He was just another student now, sitting on a bus that smelled faintly of gum and gasoline, jostling with kids who smirked at his fall from grace. For the first time in years, Lucas Reed felt ordinary. Worse than ordinary, exposed. He walked into school with his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, eyes low, pulse quick. The swagger was gone. The stares were heavier than ever, some satisfied, others pitying. That day he received his literature test back. The paper trembled in his hand before he even unfolded it. His eyes scanned the page. 18100. A blunt message. At the bottom, "Did you even read the passage?" Lucas let out a laugh, hollow, almost hysterical. No one joined him. No one thought it was funny anymore. The failures piled up like bricks on his chest. Math, 24%. History, 31%. Biology, a humiliating 0. He sat in the counselor's office while she leaned across the desk, her tone sharper than ever before. "Lucas, you're academically at risk. I don't mean behavior. I mean failure. Statistically, you're at the bottom of your entire senior class." He shrugged. "I'll hire a tutor." "You already had 3. They all quit." That silenced him. For once, Lucas had no smirk to hide behind. He left her office with his head pounding. He wanted to escape the whispers, the looks, the weight of his own uselessness. He ducked out through the back entrance, hoping no one would see him, and that's when he heard it. Soft, steady words rising from a mop's rhythm. "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." Lucas froze mid-step. He turned, confused. The janitor stood there, her wrinkled uniform damp from cleaning, her posture steady, her eyes unflinching. "What did you just say?" Lucas asked, his voice sharper than intended. "Nothing you're ready to understand, boy." Her calmness rattled him. He let out a scoff, tried to shrug it off, but as he walked away the words burrowed inside him like splinters. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. He couldn't shake it. The next morning, Lucas's hands shook as he opened another failed exam. He folded it in half before anyone could see. His chest burned with shame, anger, confusion. As he passed the cafeteria, he saw her again. She was scrubbing up a sticky soda spill, humming something gospel soft. "You," he said suddenly, stepping closer. "Last time, you said something about Socrates." She straightened slowly, wiped her hands on her apron. "And you remember it?" "Yeah. I mean, it stuck with me. Kind of weird for a janitor to be quoting ancient philosophers." Her gaze was sharp, cutting through his sarcasm. "What's weirder is when a boy with the whole world at his feet can't pass a reading test." Lucas bit the inside of his cheek. That one stung. "You used to be a teacher, didn't you?" he blurted, her arms folded. A pause. Then, with a voice steady as stone, "Not just philosophy. I taught plenty more before life threw me off balance. Lucas's heart raced. For reasons he didn't understand, he whispered, "Teach me then, please." She studied him with eyes that didn't blink away from his desperation. "One condition. You leave your name and your pride at the door. Start from zero, from the floor." His throat felt tight, but he nodded. "Fine. I can't keep failing." The next morning, before sunrise, Lucas walked into the silent school. Fog wrapped around the building, the halls echoing with emptiness. He carried a plain notebook she'd pressed into his hands the night before, its pages blank and daunting. He found her in the east wing, earbuds in, humming softly while polishing the floor in careful circles. "Hey," Lucas said, his voice awkward, almost boyish. "You said you'd teach me. Remember?" She removed one earbud, studied him with calm patience. "I remember. And I also said it wouldn't be easy. I don't care. I need this." "Then let's begin," she said simply. She extended her hand. "Evelyn Wallace." Lucas blinked. "How long have you been working here?" 3 years. Before that, other schools. And before that. She looked him square in the eyes, her voice a blade of truth. "I was a college professor. English lit and philosophy." His jaw slackened. "Why would you leave that for this?" She folded her rag neatly, without shame. "Sometimes life takes everything you thought was yours and leaves you with nothing. But what you know, and I still know how to teach." Lucas stared at her, overwhelmed, unmoored. For the first time in his life, he saw someone truly strong without power. "So, where do we start?" he asked quietly. "You start here?" Evelyn said, pulling out a battered notebook from her bag. "Every morning before class you meet me 1 hour. Every evening after I finish cleaning you write. What you learned, what you felt, what you understood. No grades, no excuses. Just honesty." Lucas swallowed, clutching the notebook like it was sacred. "What if I fail again? Then you're finally doing it right." The first few sessions were brutal. Evelyn didn't lecture. She asked questions that left him stumbling. "What did this sentence make you feel? Why do you think the character stayed silent? Can you tell me what courage sounds like?" Lucas scribbled, erased, started over. He hated it and needed it at the same time. His notebook filled with messy reflections, confessions, doubts. He wrote about his father, about feeling like a fraud, about the crushing weight of always being empty. And Evelyn read it all, her red pen marking not mistakes but challenges. "Mean this. Try again. Say it with your soul." Late one evening, Lucas sat in the cafeteria scribbling when 2 boys passed by, Josh, the star football player, and his sidekick. They snickered. "Look at little Reed," Josh said, "writing love letters to the janitor." Lucas clenched his jaw, fists tightening. He wanted to lash out. But Evelyn's hand rested gently on his shoulder. "You don't measure depth with a shallow ruler," she whispered. The words landed harder than Josh's taunts. Lucas sat back, stunned. That night, he opened his phone to a new message from his father. "Your academic record has been updated. One last warning. Turn things around or you're out. No trust fund, no apartment. Nothing." Lucas stared at the screen, hands trembling. For once, he didn't feel fear. He felt something else entirely. Readiness. Lucas sat in the dim library corner, the kind of place no one visited anymore except when they needed silence or exile. Dust hung in the air like suspended time. He hunched over the battered notebook Evelyn had given him, pen trembling as if each word weighed more than he could hold. Around him, the world of the school buzzed with its familiar cruelty, laughter spilling down the halls, footsteps echoing with freedom he didn't feel. But inside that notebook, inside Evelyn's questions, he was discovering something he didn't expect. The first question she wrote had seemed ridiculous. What did the sentence make you feel? He had laughed, rolled his eyes, nearly tossed the notebook aside. But when he tried to answer, something opened. The words didn't come easy, not like they did for others, but when they came, they were raw. It made me feel small, like the writer knew something I never will. Evelyn's response had been sharp, circled in red. Then write about the feeling of being small. Show me what it tastes like, smells like, burns like. So he did. Slowly, clumsily, honestly. Each morning before classes, he sat with her in that same back hallway. She always had a mop or rag in her hand, moving with quiet precision, but her eyes never missed him. She never lectured, never droned like his teachers. Instead, she cut him open with questions. Why do you think silence matters? What does courage sound like when no one's listening? Do you believe words can heal? He hated her for it at first. She exposed how little he knew, how shallow his thoughts were. But he kept showing up. There was something magnetic in the way she saw him, like she could peel away the layers of his arrogance and find the scared boy underneath. One evening he wrote for hours. His words spilled not about books but about his father, how Charles Reade's voice felt heavier than steel, how every word he spoke seemed carved to remind Lucas he was unworthy, how silence at the dinner table was worse than shouting. When he handed the notebook to Evelyn, she read slowly, her expression unreadable. When she finally looked up, her eyes softened. Now you're writing with blood, she said quietly. That's when truth starts. Lucas didn't understand fully, but the words lingered. The days turned into weeks. The rhythm grew sacred. He rose earlier than he ever had, walked through fog-heavy mornings with a strange hunger, and sat with Evelyn until the bell rang. Each night he returned, pen to page, exploring thoughts he had never dared voice. The notebook filled with jagged handwriting, sometimes smeared with frustration, sometimes with tears he would never admit to shedding. But the changes weren't only in the notebook. They began leaking into the classroom. One day, during history, when the teacher glossed over slavery in a single paragraph, Lucas's hand shot up. "Can we talk about how the textbook treats this like a footnote?" he asked. The class went silent. The teacher blinked, unsettled. "Where'd you hear that?" Lucas hesitated, then said with defiance, "From people who actually lived it, from writers, from thinkers, and from someone who knows how to teach." The teacher faltered. The class stared. It was the first time Lucas Reed had spoken without arrogance, without mockery, but with conviction, and people noticed. At home, though, the silence with his father grew colder. Charles barely looked at him anymore, and when he did, it was with suspicion. Lucas didn't care. For the first time, he wasn't seeking his father's approval. He was seeking something bigger, himself. One Friday evening, as Lucas scribbled in the cafeteria, Evelyn leaned over his shoulder. "What is this?" she asked. "My essay. For English. It's called The Illusion of Power." Evelyn read the first paragraph. His words burned with something new. Reflection, honesty, even anger sharpened into thought. She didn't smile. Instead, she circled a sentence in red. "This one is pretty. Too pretty. You're hiding again. Rewrite it with your soul." Lucas sighed, groaned, but obeyed. He scratched out the line, replaced it with something raw. "Power isn't in the name you inherit. It's in the person you become when no one is watching." Evelyn nodded once. "Now it's alive." Word spread quietly that Lucas Reed was different. Some mocked him, others whispered rumors. One evening, Josh, the football player, cornered him in the locker room. "Everyone says you're hanging out with the janitor. What, you too dumb for real teachers?" Lucas clenched his fists, ready to lash out, but Evelyn's words rang in his head. "You don't measure depth with a shallow ruler." He exhaled, turned, and walked away. For once, walking away felt stronger than swinging, but his defiance wasn't invisible. The assistant principal began to notice his odd patterns, the early mornings, the evenings spent writing with Evelyn, the strange shift in his grades. And murmurs started among the staff. Why was the Reed boy suddenly quoting philosophers? Why was he asking questions that weren't in the textbooks? Why did he keep meeting with the janitor? Evelyn saw the suspicion forming. She moved carefully, never giving anyone reason to accuse, but she knew systems had a way of crushing what they didn't understand. Late one night after Lucas left the cafeteria, Evelyn sat alone with his notebook in her hands. She flipped through the pages, confessions of loneliness, the ache of being unseen, the spark of awakening. Her chest tightened. She whispered a prayer she hadn't whispered in years. God, don't let him break before he blooms. The next morning, Lucas arrived earlier than usual, storm clouds gathering in his eyes. He slammed his phone down on the desk where Evelyn was polishing brass fixtures. They're threatening to cut me off, he said, voice trembling. My dad says one more failure and I lose everything. No trust fund, no car, nothing. Evelyn looked at him calmly. Then maybe losing everything is how you'll finally find something. Lucas swallowed hard. The words hit like truth and terror all at once. But before he could answer, the echo of footsteps rang down the hall. Evelyn froze, closed the notebook, and slipped it quickly into her cart. Lucas turned. It was the assistant principal. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of them together. Mr. Reed, she said slowly. What exactly are you doing here this early in the morning? Lucas opened his mouth, but no words came. Evelyn stood still, mop in hand, her face unreadable. The silence stretched, heavy, dangerous. Something was about to break. The assistant principal's gaze lingered too long, sharp as glass. Lucas shifted uneasily, words stuck in his throat. Evelyn stepped forward, her mop still in hand, her voice smooth and measured. Mr. Reed was just early, she said evenly. Some students find quiet in the mornings, less distraction before the day begins. The administrator's eyes flicked between them, doubtful, but unwilling to press further. Don't let it become a habit, she muttered before walking. Off, heels clicking down the hall. Only when the echo faded did Lucas exhale. She didn't believe that. She didn't have to, Evelyn replied calmly. She just had to move on. That's the thing about people who guard the system. They don't need proof, just suspicion. Don't give them more than that. Lucas sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. Feels like we're doing something wrong. Evelyn knelt across from him, her eyes steady. Truth always looks suspicious in places built on appearances. The words dug into him, deeper than any reprimand ever had. That afternoon, Evelyn gave him a book with faded edges and worn corners. James Baldwin. The Fire Next Time. Lucas flipped through the pages, confused. Why this one? He asked. Because it'll show you what it means to stand in fire without burning up. Because you need to learn from voices that carried truth when the world tried to silence them. He read it in fragments at first, tripping over passages, underlining phrases that hit like thunder. The impossible is the least that one can demand. Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. Late at night, in the half-light of his room, Lucas scribbled reflections until his wrist ached. He wrote about masks, how his whole life had been one, the rich boy mask, the untouchable air mask, the smirk that covered emptiness. Baldwin's. Words felt like fire peeling those masks away. When he handed the notebook to Evelyn, she smiled faintly. Now you're learning to see. It wasn't just words anymore. The lessons began bleeding into who he was. He stopped mocking teachers. He started listening. His classmates noticed the strange new quiet around him. Not smug, not hollow, but focused. But change paints a target. One afternoon in the cafeteria, Josh slammed his tray down beside him. So Reed, you're a philosopher now? Reading books with the janitor like some charity case? Lucas didn't flinch. He looked Josh in the eye, calm but steady. I'd rather be a charity case than an empty one. The cafeteria went silent. Even Josh's grin faltered. Lucas walked away, his heart pounding but stronger than ever before. That night, Evelyn found him scribbling again in the old library. You stood your ground, he shrugged. Didn't feel like ground. Felt like fire. Good, she said. Fire changes things. Over the next weeks, their lessons grew bolder. Evelyn brought in the souls of black folk, beloved, even old philosophy texts. She didn't hand them to him with answers. She handed them like riddles, like keys, demanding he open doors himself. "What does freedom sound like?" she asked one morning. Lucas thought hard, then whispered, "Like silence breaking." Evelyn's eyes softened. "Now you're closer than you've ever been." But their secret was no longer entirely secret. Whispers spread among students. Rumors painted Evelyn as an eccentric janitor gathering lost kids, Lucas as her strange disciple. A few others grew curious. One afternoon, a girl named Priya approached Lucas timidly after biology. "Hey, I heard you're learning? With her?" Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "Can I come?" she whispered. I don't get writing at all." That evening, Priya showed up in the library. Evelyn didn't question, didn't scold. She simply asked Priya the same merciless questions. Within days, 2 more students joined, then another. The empty library became something new, a secret classroom alive with questions no one else dared ask. Lucas looked around at them one night, astonished. "This is crazy. We're like a real class." Evelyn leaned on her mop handle, eyes glinting. Crazy is where truth often begins. But truth attracts resistance. The assistant principal called Evelyn into her office one gray afternoon. The walls were lined with certificates, each one sterile, proud, official. The administrator's smile was thin, her words colder than the air conditioning. "Miss Wallace, we've received reports that you're gathering students after hours. Parents are asking questions. It's unorthodox." "I'm teaching," Evelyn said plainly. "You're not a certified instructor here. It's not in your role." Evelyn met her eyes without flinching. "Neither is saving a student from drowning. But if I see it happening, I don't ask for permission. I act." The assistant principal frowned. "This isn't about heroics. It's about order. We can't have blurred boundaries." Evelyn stood, her back straight. "Sometimes the lines you're protecting are the very ones strangling kids." She left before the administrator could respond, her footsteps unhurried, her dignity intact. Lucas found out the next morning. He slammed his hand on the desk beside her mop bucket. "They told you to stop? That's insane." Evelyn wiped the floor calmly. "That's what systems do. They don't attack what's broken. They attack what's working." "They can't. Shut this down," he protested. "I'll tell my dad. I'll go to the board. No." Evelyn cut in, her voice firm. "Not yet. Not with your father's name. Your voice needs to stand on its own, Lucas, otherwise this won't mean anything." Lucas gritted his teeth, frustration and respect battling inside him. That night he stayed late in the library, alone, writing furiously. His words bled with defiance. "They can try to silence her, but they can't silence what she planted in me." The next morning he pinned the page on the school bulletin board outside the cafeteria, under the bold title, "Learning doesn't make me weak. Ignorance does." Lucas Reed. By lunch, the paper was gone, torn down. But whispers of it remained, and with whispers came eyes, sharper, hungrier, watching their every move. The rain had fallen hard all night, leaving the streets slick and the air heavy with damp earth. Lucas walked into school early, a coffee in one hand and the notebook in the other. His steps echoed in the quiet halls. The building felt different now, not marble halls of privilege, but a labyrinth where he hunted meaning. He found Evelyn in the east wing, humming softly, earbuds in, mopping in steady circles. For a moment he just stood there watching her. She moved with patience, with rhythm, like the act of cleaning itself was a meditation. There was nothing hurried about her, nothing desperate, just a woman rooted, while the rest of the world spun out of control. "You're early," she said, without turning, pulling one earbud out. "I brought you coffee," Lucas replied, handing her the cup. She accepted it with a faint smile. "And something else," Lucas added, lifting the notebook. His voice trembled with anticipation. I looked you up. Evelyn froze. Slowly she set the mop aside, her eyes narrowing slightly. You what? Not, in a creepy way, he rushed. I wanted to know. You quote Socrates, you tear apart my writing like you've been doing it for decades, and I found something. An old article. Evelyn Wallace, tenured professor at the University of Chicago, guest speaker, published writer, award winner. Her silence stretched. She closed her eyes for a long moment, as if the name he'd just spoken belonged to a ghost. That woman existed, she said finally. She just doesn't get invited back anymore. What happened? Lucas pressed, voice soft. She leaned on her mop handle, gaze heavy with memory. I blew the whistle on a plagiarism scandal involving a dean. Big name. Powerful. I refused. Hush money. Refused to stay quiet. They shut me out. Quietly. Permanently. Colleagues vanished. Opportunities disappeared. And then, my husband died. Car accident. On the way to a conference I organized. Lucas swallowed hard. You lost everything. Her lips tightened, but her voice did not break. Except my mind. And my voice. Those are mine. Always. Silence filled the hallway. Thick, unflinching. Lucas felt something raw ignite inside. Him. Admiration. Anger. Sorrow. This woman, invisible to the world, had carried losses heavier than his worst nightmares. Yet here she was, still teaching, still fighting. I want to make you a deal, he said suddenly, his voice trembling with resolve. Evelyn tilted her head. A deal? You teach me like I'm one of your college students. Really teach me. Don't hold back. Don't treat me like I'm fragile. I'll do the work. I'll fail, rewrite, fail again, whatever it takes. I want to become someone. Not because of my name, because of what I do. She studied him for a long, silent moment. His eyes weren't the arrogant, empty eyes she'd first seen. They were hungry, honest. And you're part of the deal, she asked. I won't quit, Lucas whispered. No matter how hard it gets. Finally, she extended her hand. Then we have a deal. Their handshake was simple, but electric. No contracts, no signatures, just truth binding them together. From that day forward, the lessons deepened. Evelyn built a plan, not out of worksheets and grades, but out of understanding. She gave him Baldwin, Hughes, Morrison, Du Bois. She made him write reflections. Instead of essays, demand meaning instead of memorization. At night, Lucas filled his notebook with jagged paragraphs. Ignorance is the easiest inheritance. Knowledge is the one you have to fight for. He scribbled until his hands ached, pages heavy with ink and confession. Evelyn's feedback was relentless. Red circles around hollow sentences, margins filled, with sharp notes. Stop hiding. Don't write pretty. Write real. Sometimes he left frustrated, even furious. But always, he came back. One evening, he burst into the library with someone new trailing behind. This is Priya, he said. She's in my biology class. She needs help with writing. Evelyn looked at Priya, then at Lucas, then back at Priya. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Looks like we've got ourselves a class. Soon, more came. Quietly, hesitantly. Students who felt lost, overlooked, broken by a system that didn't see them. They gathered in the forgotten library, books spread across old tables, voices rising in debates and questions. Evelyn moved among them like a conductor, not giving answers but pulling truth out of each trembling voice. The library became a sanctuary, a secret. But secrets have shadows. The assistant principal grew more watchful. Teachers whispered. Some parents started asking why their kids were suddenly quoting Baldwin and Morrison at dinner tables. Lucas could feel eyes on him wherever he walked. One gray afternoon, Evelyn called him aside. Her face was unreadable. They're watching, she said simply. Let them, Lucas snapped. We're not doing anything wrong. Evelyn shook her head. Truth doesn't matter to power. Control does. If they decide this threatens order, they'll end it. And they'll end me. Lucas's chest tightened. Then I'll fight for you. I'll tell everyone. I'll tell my dad. Her hand gripped. His arm firm, steady. Not yet. Not with your father's name. If this is going to matter, it has to be your voice. Not his. His throat burned. He wanted to scream, to rage at the unfairness. But she was right. If he used his father's empire to save her, the lesson would die in the shadow of privilege. That night, Lucas sat in his room, staring at the notebook. His father's words echoed. If you keep failing, you lose everything. Evelyn's words, whispered, maybe losing everything is how you'll finally find something. He opened a fresh page and wrote, if they take her away, they take the only truth I've ever known. I can't let that happen. The next morning, Lucas walked into school, with fire in his chest. He pinned a page to the student bulletin board. His handwriting was raw, jagged, furious. They told me to stop learning. They told her to stop teaching. But truth doesn't need permission. Lucas read. By lunch, the page was ripped down. But the damage was done. The whispers were louder, the eyes sharper, and somewhere in the offices above, a decision was being made. The hook came in the form of whispers. Whispers that spread faster than morning announcements, curling through the hallways like smoke. By the end of the week, everyone at the academy had heard at least one version. That Lucas Reed, the spoiled heir, was spending nights in the library with the janitor. Some said she was tutoring him. Others swore it was something more scandalous. No one guessed the truth, that in those dust-choked aisles, revolutions were being born. Lucas felt the shift immediately. The way students looked at him was no longer envy or disdain, but curiosity. He didn't flinch under it. If anything, it steeled him. At lunch, when Josh and his crew made their usual jabs, love letters with the mop lady, Lucas didn't fire back. He just opened a worn copy of The Fire Next Time and started reading aloud. The cafeteria grew uncomfortably quiet until Josh stormed out. By then, the library was no longer just Lucas and Priya. 3 more students joined, then 5. By the end of the month, they had nearly a dozen, crammed into the abandoned room after hours, their voices weaving arguments about justice, history, and meaning. Evelyn stood at the center, not with authority but with presence. Don't just repeat what Baldwin wrote, she told them one night, pacing between tables. Tell me what it does to you. Tell me how it breaks you. Tell me what kind of person it demands you to be. Priya raised her hand, voice trembling. It makes me angry, like the world has been lying to me in textbooks. Good, Evelyn said, her voice sharp but encouraging. Anger is the seed, but what will you plant with it? Another student, Jamal, spoke up. Change. Evelyn's eyes softened. Then write it down. Don't just say it. Claim it. The notebooks became weapons. Pages bled with fury, grief, longing. For the first time, these students felt not tested but seen. But as the circle grew, so did the tension. One rainy Thursday, Evelyn was called into the office. The assistant principal's voice was polished, corporate. Miss Wallace, we've received concerns. Concerns, Evelyn repeated evenly. Yes. Parents have noticed unusual discussions at home, quoting authors that aren't in the syllabus, questioning curriculum, and gathering in unapproved spaces. I'm teaching, Evelyn said simply. You're not a certified instructor here. It's not in your job description. Her jaw tightened. Neither is saving a boy's life, but I did that anyway. The assistant principal blinked, unsettled, then leaned forward. I'm telling you this as a courtesy. Keep within your role, Miss Wallace, or there will be consequences. Evelyn left without answering, but her back was straighter than when she entered. That night she said nothing about the meeting to the students, but Lucas noticed the quiet shadow in her eyes. What did they say to you? He pressed. Nothing I didn't already know, she replied. You're lying, Lucas snapped. Evelyn stopped, turned, and locked eyes with him. I'm protecting you. From what? From a system that would rather keep you comfortable than conscious. From power that doesn't forgive people who step out of line. From the cost of standing with me. Lucas clenched his fists. Then, let me pay it. I don't care if my father cuts me off. I don't care if the school expels me. I don't care if... Her hand shot up, silencing him. You're not ready to fight them. Not yet. If you raise your voice now, they'll call it rebellion. Privileged arrogance, they'll crush it before it begins. But if you grow your voice first, if you make it undeniable, then maybe they can't ignore you. Lucas stared at her, heart pounding. Then teach me how. She nodded once. Then write something real. Not for me. Not for grades. For the world. And so he did. Late nights stretched into early mornings. Lucas filled notebook after notebook, pouring out everything Evelyn demanded of him. Essays that bled honesty, reflections that stripped him bare, titles scrawled in ink, the illusion of power, the courage to unlearn, the prison of a name, Evelyn, tore through them like fire, marking them up, forcing him deeper. This sentence is beautiful but cowardly. Start again. This idea is strong but safe. Push harder. Lucas would slam his pen down in frustration, mutter curses under his breath, then pick it back up. He didn't quit. Not once. And the others followed. Priya, Jamal, Kayla, Marcus. The notebooks multiplied. The library became electric, with scribbling pens, heated debates, voices cracking under the weight of truth they were too young to carry but couldn't put down anymore. One night, Jamal read aloud a piece he wrote about his father working 3 jobs. His voice broke halfway. Evelyn didn't comfort him with platitudes. She simply said, "That's what truth feels like. Don't run from it." They didn't realize it, but the movement had already begun. Then came the ripple. A teacher in history. Class assigned an essay on Reconstruction. Lucas turned in 5 pages not just on dates and policies, but on how textbooks erased the scars of slavery. The teacher stared at him afterward. Where did this come from? Lucas just smiled faintly. I finally learned how to read between the lines. Word spread. Teachers noticed. Some were quietly impressed, others unsettled. Students began asking more questions in class, real questions, hard questions, and then, the first strike. Evelyn arrived one morning to find her mop closet cleaned out, her supplies gone, her name tag removed from the door. When she asked the head custodian, he only shrugged. Orders from upstairs. By lunch, the rumor hit the students. Evelyn was being investigated. That evening, the library was packed with nervous faces. What happens if they fire you? Priya whispered. They will, Evelyn said calmly. The only question is when. Lucas felt heat rise in his chest. Then we fight back. Evelyn shook her head. Not with fists. With words. With truth. They can strip me of this job, but they can't strip what you've already found here. Unless you let them. The room fell silent. For the first time, Lucas saw fear in the other's eyes. The possibility of losing her. Losing this. Losing the one place they finally felt alive. He looked at his notebook, its pages thick with her questions, her red ink, her voice. He knew what he had to do. The speech contest. End of year. Topic: what it means to win in life. It was posted that morning on every bulletin board. Lucas clenched the paper in his hand. This was it. His voice. His chance. His war. And if he stood on that stage, if he told the truth out loud, the system wouldn't just silence Evelyn, they would come for him too. The announcement came quietly, the way systems always do their ugliest work, not with a bang but with a memo. A slip of paper pinned to the staff board. Budget cuts. Reorganization. Effective immediately. Evelyn Wallace, janitorial staff, released from duty. Lucas heard it from Priya first. She found him in the cafeteria, pale, clutching her phone. She's gone. What do you mean gone? His voice cracked too loud. Heads turned. They escorted her out this morning. No warning, just... Priya swallowed, her eyes glassy. She didn't even get to say goodbye. The world seemed to tilt under Lucas's feet. He dropped his tray with a crash and bolted, through the halls searching. The mop bucket, the wrinkled coat she always hung by the side entrance. All gone. Only the echo of her presence remained, haunting every tile she'd polished clean. He felt like he couldn't breathe. His fists slammed into a locker, the metal rattling with hollow fury. For the first time, he didn't care who saw his anger. That night, his room became a battlefield. He tore through old notebooks, pages covered in her sharp handwriting. Don't write pretty, write real. He clutched them to his chest like lifelines. His father's voice cut through the memory. If you keep going down this road, you lose everything. Lucas didn't sleep. He sat at his desk, the glow of a single lamp illuminating blank paper. Across the top, he wrote the contest title. What? It means to win in life. But he didn't write for the judges, he didn't write for grades, he wrote for Evelyn. Every word a tribute, a rebellion, a fire that refused to die even if she was gone. The next morning, Charles Reed was waiting in the kitchen, phone in hand, coffee untouched. His gray suit was immaculate, his expression unreadable. You've been quiet, Charles said. Lucas didn't answer. He slid the draft of his speech across the counter. Read this. Charles raised an eyebrow, skimmed the first lines. His lip curled. This is sentimental drivel. It's truth, Lucas said firmly. It's weakness, Charles snapped. He slammed the paper down. You're standing in front of the entire community in a week, and this is what you want to present? A love letter to a janitor? She's not just a janitor, Lucas shouted. She's the reason I'm not failing, the reason I can think, the reason I'm not just your spoiled disappointment anymore. Charles's eyes darkened. If you go up there and humiliate this family, if you credit a woman who mops floors for your success, then you're done. No trust fund, no car, no safety net, nothing. Lucas's chest heaved. Then maybe I need to lose it all. Maybe that's the only way I'll ever find myself. For a long, silent moment, father and son stared at each other, two storms colliding. Then Charles turned away, cold and final. Pack your things, he said. You're done. Lucas stumbled back, his legs weak but his resolve iron. That evening, he returned to the abandoned library, his sanctuary now hollow. He set his notebooks on the table and whispered into the silence. I'm still here. I'm not quitting, the V. Words echoed back to him, fragile but alive. In the days leading up to the contest, Lucas poured himself into the speech. Every lunch break, every midnight hour, he rewrote, refined, sharpened. Priya and Jamal listened, offering quiet nods of encouragement. The others whispered about how the school was buzzing. Everyone wanted to hear what the Reed boy would say. Some expected arrogance, others expected collapse. No one expected the truth. On the morning of the contest, Lucas walked through the halls, not with swagger, but with purpose. Students stared, teachers whispered. The assistant principal glared. He didn't care. He carried a single object with him. Evelyn's worn-out blue book, The Souls of Black Folk. Inside, her handwritten notes crowded the margins. At the top of the first page, in faded ink, one line stood out. Learning is transformation. Lucas pressed the book to his chest like armor. When the afternoon bell rang, the auditorium filled. Parents in designer coats, teachers lined in rows, college scouts with clipboards. At the back, Charles Reed in his impeccable suit, arms crossed, jaw set. The weight of expectation pressed heavy on the air. Backstage, Lucas's palms sweated against the notebook containing his speech. He closed his eyes, inhaled slowly. He could almost hear Evelyn's voice. Don't write pretty. Write real. His name was called. Lucas Reed. The stage lights burned hot against his face. The crowd hushed. He walked to the podium, each step echoing like thunder in his ears. His heartbeat was louder than the whispers. He placed the notebook down, opened it, then paused. His eyes lifted to the audience. "My name is Lucas Reed," he began. His voice wavered, then steadied. "Most of you know me as the kid who wasted every chance, who failed, who mocked, who lived off his father's name. You're not wrong. That was me. That was the boy who thought power was inherited, not earned." A ripple ran through the crowd. Teachers leaned in. Students stilled. But then, Lucas continued, his voice growing stronger. "Someone saw me, not a teacher in a suit, not a counselor behind a desk, not even my father. A woman who everyone else walked past every day without a second glance. A janitor." Gasps fluttered through the audience. Charles's jaw clenched. "She taught me how to think, how to read not just words, but the spaces between them. She taught me that ignorance is weakness, not knowledge. She didn't just clean the floors of this school. She cleaned the fog out of my head. She believed in me when no one else did. And she was fired for it. Silenced. Because systems don't like it when the people they ignore start making a real difference." The auditorium was pin-drop silent now. Lucas lifted the worn blue book. This was hers. She told me learning is transformation. That real winning isn't about being rich or powerful. It's about becoming someone worth remembering. And if that means losing everything else, and then maybe that's how you win. The silence stretched, heavy, trembling. Then a single clap. Another. And then the auditorium erupted. A standing ovation, applause crashing like waves. But as Lucas bowed his head, scanning the crowd, he froze. At the very back, half hidden in shadow, a woman in a simple scarf wiped tears from her eyes. Evelyn. She had come back. The video of Lucas's speech spread faster than wildfire. By the next morning, it was all anyone could talk about. Students shared shaky recordings on Instagram and TikTok. Alumni reposted it with captions like, "This is what our school should stand for." Local news outlets picked it up. The headline traveled further than any Reed Corporation press release ever had. Billionaire's son credits school janitor for saving his life. For Lucas, the aftermath was surreal. Strangers stopped him in the hallway not to mock or envy him, but to thank him. Teachers who once tiptoed around him now met his gaze with something unfamiliar. Respect. Students whispered his name not with derision but with curiosity. And in quiet corners, kids who had never spoken to him before approached shyly. "Do you think maybe she'd teach me too?" Lucas didn't know how to answer. Evelyn was gone, or so he thought. 2 nights later, he found her. Not in the school, but in the back of a crowded community center where a local college had invited her to speak. She stood at a podium in her simple cardigan, voice steady, words searing. The worth of a teacher isn't measured by their title, but by the lives they awaken. The applause that followed shook the room. Lucas sat in the back, tears burning his eyes. She wasn't gone. She was rising. By the end of the month, Evelyn had been offered a position at a local college. Not glamorous, not tenure track, but hers. A classroom. A chalkboard. Students. She accepted with quiet dignity. Lucas felt pride swell inside him, mixed with grief. The library sessions were over. Their secret classroom had dissolved. But the seeds had already spread. At home, things were colder than ever. Charles Reed had not spoken a word to him since the speech. The silence was worse than anger, worse than threats. It was erasure. One evening, Lucas came home to find his belongings packed neatly into boxes stacked by the front door. "You're serious," Lucas muttered. Charles didn't look up from his tablet. "You wanted to live without my name. Now you can." Lucas's chest tightened, but he lifted the first box without flinching. "Fine." He left without another word. For the first time in his life, Lucas Reed had no mansion, no Audi, no safety net. He rented a small room above a diner with peeling wallpaper and a leaking faucet. He ate reheated pasta and wrote essays by lamplight. He wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row, and strangely, he felt alive. College applications arrived in the mail, Ivy League envelopes, weighty with prestige. Charles had pulled strings long before, smoothing paths. Lucas held them in his hands, stared at the embossed crests, then tossed them unopened into the trash. Instead, he sent an acceptance form to a small college downtown, one known for social justice and education programs. When asked why in the ERE interview, he said simply, "Because I want to teach the way Evelyn taught me." The admissions officer, stunned, nodded slowly. "Then welcome." When he told Evelyn, she smiled, tears in her eyes. "You're choosing purpose over privilege. That's harder than any test." Lucas shrugged, embarrassed. "I just want to matter." "You already do," she said softly. But the story didn't end quietly. One morning, Lucas woke to his phone. Buzzing nonstop. News articles flooded his screen. Reed-Air rejects Ivy League offers to attend local college. Charles Reed's son chooses education over empire. By noon, it was everywhere. Investors whispered about what it meant. Reporters hounded Charles for comment. For the first time in his empire's history, his son had become the headline, and not for the reasons he approved of. That evening, Charles showed up at Lucas's rented room. The suit was flawless, the anger barely restrained. "You've humiliated me," Charles said without preamble. "You've humiliated this family." Lucas crossed his arms. "No, I spoke the truth. You think truth pays bills, builds companies. Truth is for dreamers, for failures. Power is for men like me, men who win." Lucas's voice was steady. "Then maybe winning isn't what I thought it was. Maybe it's not about crushing people. Maybe it's about lifting them." Charles's eyes narrowed. "If you walk this path, you're no son of mine." Lucas's throat tightened, but he didn't look away. "Then I'll make a new name. Mine." For the first time, Charles faltered. Just for a second, his son looked less like the boy he dismissed and more like a man. But he recovered quickly, his expression hardening. Without another word, he left. Lucas closed the door, leaned against it, heart pounding. He wanted to collapse. Instead, he picked up his notebook and began to write. The cost of truth is high, but silence costs your soul. Weeks turned into months. Lucas began classes at his new college, walking across cracked sidewalks with students who didn't know his last name and didn't care. He sat in lecture halls smaller than his father's dining room and listened with a hunger he never felt before. He stayed up late writing papers, not because he feared failure, but because he wanted to succeed. Meanwhile, Evelyn's name returned quietly to academic circles. She spoke at conferences, published essays. Her reputation rebuilt not by institutions but by the undeniable truth of her voice. And she and Lucas stayed close. She became his anchor, his mentor, his reminder that meaning mattered more than money. But not all wounds healed. One afternoon, Lucas received a plain envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a clipped article from a business journal. The headline, "Charles Reed expands global holdings, no mention of family." At the bottom, in bold pen strokes, were 4 words scrawled by hand. "You chose your side." Lucas sat on his narrow bed, the paper trembling in his hands. He knew his father was right. He had chosen. He had burned the bridge. And yet, as he looked at the notebook stacked around him, filled with Evelyn's red ink and his own scrawled truths, he knew something else. He had chosen the only side that mattered. But storms don't end with choices. They only begin. Because as Lucas's name spread in education circles, as Evelyn's institute quietly took root, a new battle was rising on the horizon, one that would test whether their fragile revolution could survive outside those library walls. The first meeting happened on a cracked basketball court in the heart of the city. The chain-link fence rattled in the wind, paint peeled from the hoops, and weeds split through the asphalt. It didn't look like a classroom, but Evelyn insisted. It was the perfect place to begin. Learning doesn't need marble walls, she said, as she set a stack of second-hand books on a folding table. It just needs people who are willing. Lucas stood beside her, clutching a folder of handwritten flyers he'd plastered around community centers and libraries. He half expected no one to show. But one by one they came. A boy with tired eyes and calloused hands who worked nights at a grocery store. A girl with braids who confessed she hadn't read a book cover to cover since middle school. A mother who brought her teenage son saying softly, "He's smart, he just needs someone to see it." They sat on mismatched chairs in a circle, and Evelyn began. Not with lectures, with questions. What scares you about learning? What makes you feel small? What do you want to understand before you leave this world? The answers cracked something open in the air. Fear, shame, dreams. And in that rawness, the Evelyn Institute was born. Word spread. Within weeks, the basketball court was too small. They moved into a repurposed community center, a space with peeling paint and flickering lights but filled with voices that had been silent too long. They came after work, after school, on weekends. They read Baldwin and Morrison, scribbled their truths into donated notebooks, stood and spoke aloud in trembling voices that grew steadier with each night. Lucas coordinated programs, made phone calls, handled donations. Evelyn taught with the same fire she had always carried, tearing down walls of ignorance one question at a time. Together they were building something fragile, but alive. The city began to notice. Local papers wrote articles. Grassroots classroom changing lives. Donations trickled in. College students volunteered to help. It wasn't prestige, it wasn't wealth, but it was power of another kind, and power draws attention. One evening, as Lucas locked up the community center, a sleek black car rolled up. The tinted window lowered, and there he was, Charles Reed. Immaculate suit, eyes cold as steel. Lucas froze, keys still in his hand. "What do you want?" Charles stepped out, his polished shoes crunching against gravel. He looked around the crumbling exterior of the center, disgust flashing across his face. "This is what you left me for?" Lucas's jaw tightened. "I didn't leave you. I found myself." Charles stepped closer, voice low. "You're wasting yourself here. You could be running billion-dollar deals. Instead, you're babysitting failures in a rundown gym." "They're not failures," Lucas snapped. "They're people. People you'd never see because they can't increase your stock portfolio." For the first time, Charles's mask cracked. His voice rose, sharp and raw. "Do you think I built all this for you to throw it away? Do you think I clawed my way out of nothing so my son could choose nothing again?" Lucas blinked, stunned. There was no cold detachment now. There was pain, fury, fear. "You don't understand," Charles continued, his voice trembling under its steel. "I was you once, empty, invisible. I swore my son would never feel that, and now you're choosing it." Lucas swallowed hard. "I'm not choosing emptiness. I'm choosing purpose. There's a difference." Charles's jaw tightened. He looked away, then back. "If you want to burn bridges, fine, but don't drag my name through your ashes." He shoved a check into Lucas's hand. 6 figures. "Take it. Run your little project, just don't use me." Lucas looked at the paper, then at his father. Slowly, he tore the check in half, then in quarters. The pieces drifted to the ground between them. "I don't need your money," Lucas said softly. "Not anymore." Charles stared at him, stunned. For the first time, he saw his son not as an heir, but as something else entirely. A man who had chosen a path he couldn't control. Without another word, Charles turned, climbed into the car, and disappeared into the night. Inside the center, Evelyn watched from the window. When Lucas entered, she asked gently, "You all right?" He exhaled, shaking. "No, but I'm sure." Evelyn's smile was faint but proud. That's the beginning of becoming. Months passed. The Evelyn Institute grew. Students who once whispered now debated with fire. Kids who had been told they'd never graduate held up essays with trembling pride. A 12-year-old handed Evelyn a notebook and whispered, This place made me feel smart for the first time. She cried that night. So did Lucas, but success has a way of breeding enemies. A powerful local politician, once a close ally of Charles, began publicly criticizing the institute. It's unregulated, he sneered on the evening news. Unqualified, people teaching unapproved material, dangerous ideas being fed to our children. Reporters swarmed, donors hesitated. The board of the community center threatened eviction. Lucas felt panic claw at him. The dream they'd built was fragile, so fragile, and now the world's weight was pressing down. One night he sat in the empty classroom, head in his hands. What if they shut us down? What if they crush everything we've built? Evelyn sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Then we build again. Truth doesn't die because someone locks a door. It finds another one. He looked at her, tears brimming. I don't know if I can do this. You can, she said firmly. Because you already are, and because you're not alone. Her words steadied him. He stood, wiped his eyes, and whispered, Then we fight. Not with money, not with power, with voices. The next day, Lucas organized their first public event, a gathering in the city square. Students read their essays aloud, trembling but unbroken. Evelyn spoke with fire. Lucas closed the night with words that echoed through the crowd. Greatness doesn't come from being seen. It comes from seeing others. The applause was thunderous. Reporters filmed, and the Evelyn Institute was no longer a secret. But the bigger it grew, the bigger the target became. That night, Lucas returned to his small apartment to find a plain envelope slipped under his door. He opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. Stop, or you'll regret it. No signature, no mark, just the weight of a threat. Lucas sat on the edge of his bed, the note trembling in his hand. For the first time since he began, he wasn't just afraid of failing. He was afraid of what winning might cost. The note sat on Lucas's desk like a live wire. He stared at it until the words blurred, his chest tightening with every breath. Stop, or you'll regret it. He had expected pushback, criticism, even ridicule. But this was different. This was danger. He took the note to Evelyn the next morning. She read it silently, her face calm but her grip tight on the paper. Finally, she folded it neatly and slid it into her bag. You're not scared? Lucas asked. Of course I am, she replied. Fear just means the truth has teeth. And if someone's this afraid of what we're building, it means we're doing something right. But what if they come after you? After us? Evelyn looked at him with eyes full of steel and sorrow. Then we stand. That's all we can do. The tension only grew. Articles praising the Evelyn Institute were met, with op-eds condemning it. The politician who had sneered at them now called for an official investigation. Rumors swirled of permits being revoked, of funding being blocked, of doors being shut. Yet the students kept coming. They packed into the center every night, voices, louder, pens scratching faster, essays burning brighter. Their hunger outweighed their fear, and that gave Lucas strength. Still, he couldn't silence the gnawing dread. One evening, as he walked home, he spotted a black car idling at the corner. Its headlights followed him for half a block before peeling away. His pulse hammered. The message was clear. When he told Evelyn, she only nodded. They want you rattled. Don't give them that power. But Lucas was rattled, more than he wanted to admit. The breaking point came on the night of their first citywide event. They had rented a theater with peeling velvet seats and flickering lights. Students were lined up backstage, clutching their essays, rehearsing nervously. Evelyn adjusted her glasses, murmuring encouragement. Lucas stood at the podium, staring at the empty stage, wondering if anyone would come. But when the doors opened, the theater filled. Parents, neighbors, teachers, strangers. The room buzzed with anticipation. The first student stepped up, voice trembling at first, then steady. They told me I was slow, that I'd never keep up. But here, I found out, I'm not broken. I'm just beginning. Applause thundered. One after another, students spoke, their words raw and electric. Lucas felt tears sting his eyes. This was what winning looked like. Then, halfway through the program, the doors at the back burst open. A group of men in suits entered, stern-faced, clipboards in hand. The politician himself trailed behind, his smirk tight. Lucas's stomach dropped. They were here to shut it down. Evelyn stepped to his side, whispering, "Keep going." Lucas swallowed hard, turned back to the mic. "Next speaker," he said, his voice steady. The program continued. The men scribbled notes, whispered among themselves, but they didn't stop it. Not yet. Finally, it was Lucas's turn. He stepped forward, his palms sweating, his chest heavy. He scanned the crowd. And there, near the back, stood Charles Reed. For the first time, his father wasn't in a suit of armor, but in the vulnerability of presence. He had come. Lucas gripped the podium. "My name is Lucas Reed," he began. "And they told me to stop. They told me I'd regret this. Maybe I will, but regret is better than silence, because silence kills more than voices. It kills souls." He lifted Evelyn's battered blue book, holding it high. "This saved me. Not the name Reed, not money, not power, a teacher, a woman who everyone walked past without a second glance. She taught me that greatness doesn't come from being seen. It comes from seeing others. And tonight I want you to see them." He gestured to the students behind him. "Every voice here matters. Every story here deserves to be heard. And if that threatens systems built on silence, then let them be threatened. We are not stopping." The theater erupted. Applause, cheers, stomping feet. Even the politicians couldn't quiet it. For the first time, Lucas felt unbreakable. Backstage, Evelyn hugged him. "That was your voice, not mine. Yours." Later that night, as the theater emptied, Charles approached. His face was unreadable, but his eyes shimmered. "You've made your choice," Charles said. "Yes," Lucas replied, steady. "And so have you." A long silence stretched. Then, to Lucas's shock, Charles's voice cracked. "I came tonight expecting to be embarrassed. Instead, I cried." Lucas's breath caught. Charles's hand trembled as he reached out. "I don't understand this path, but I see you, son. For the first time, I see you." The hug that followed was not polished, not perfect, but real. Two men fumbling toward forgiveness. Months later, the Evelyn Institute opened a permanent space, not a peeling community center, but a repurposed brick building with wide windows and long tables. The city rallied. Donations poured in. Students lined up. Evelyn taught with chalk dust on her hands, fire in her eyes. Lucas ran programs but never stopped learning. At the ribbon cutting, a young girl handed Evelyn a notebook. "This place made me feel smart for the first time," she whispered. Evelyn wept openly, holding the notebook to her chest. Lucas wept too. Years passed. The institute grew, expanded, became a beacon. Evelyn's name was spoken with honor again. Lucas became not the heir to an empire, but the builder of one that mattered. On the night Lucas accepted a National Education Award, he stood on stage, microphone in hand, the lights blinding. He paused, then smiled faintly. They said, "I failed everything, but then I learned the one lesson that saved me. That greatness doesn't come from what you own. It doesn't come from money or power or names. It comes from seeing others, from lifting them when no one else will. And sometimes the teacher who changes your life isn't the one in a suit or behind a desk. Sometimes she's holding a mop, quoting philosophers when no one's listening. Her name is Evelyn Wallace, and she didn't just save my grades, she saved my soul." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Evelyn sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face, her hands clasped around the worn blue book that had started it all. And Lucas Reed, no longer just a name, no longer just a son, stood not as the heir to an empire, but as the proof that transformation was possible. That sometimes the greatest revolutions start not with power, but with someone who refused to be unseen.